2023 was yet another year of international crises. And this week, Power and Politics dug into geopolitical flashpoints to watch in 2024. So far, we've discussed the Middle East, the Russia-Ukraine war, India, and China. And today, we're digging into a pivotal election that could define the international order for the next 4 years as Americans head to the polls on November 5th. The most likely choices are Donald Trump or Joe Biden. The two have very different views for a U.S.-led global order. Biden is taking a hit for U.S. support of Israel and waning public support for Ukraine, and Trumpism continues to leave its mark on the world stage. All of this while the Republican frontrunner is facing many criminal charges, including some related to inciting a political insurrection after he falsely claimed the 2020 election was stolen.
My legal issues, every one of them, everyone, civil and the criminal ones, are all set up by Joe Biden, crooked Joe Biden.
Donald Trump's campaign is obsessed with the past, not the future. He's willing to sacrifice our democracy.
Laura Dawson is the executive director at Future Borders Coalition, and David McNaughton is the president of Palantir Technologies Canada and former Canadian ambassador to the United States. Thank you both very much for joining me.
Hi.
Well, Laura, as we saw there, it's tough. It would be tough to imagine a tougher election year than 2020. Yet here we are in 2024. I just wonder where you see this maybe going, because if you look at what happened last time, the way Donald Trump sowed such distrust in the results even before they happened, and it leading up to January 6th, where do you think the country is right now in this?
Well, I would like to think that Americans will respond to their better angels when they're in the polling booth and will lean towards a more equitable position, someone who is more capable of managing crisis, managing the country, managing allies. But I'm not going to put any bets on that. When you look at the polling numbers right now, Donald Trump is just so far ahead of other Republicans, and he's mostly ahead of Joe Biden. I think unless something very significant happens, we're going to end up with another Trump presidency. And I think this one could be much worse for Canada.
David, where do you see that going? Because he's promised to be a dictator on day one. I mean, do you share that prognostication that it could be Donald Trump take two?
Yeah, I mean, look, I agree with Laura in the sense that, if you had to bet today, you'd have to say that Trump is certainly the leading candidate to become president once again. Having said that, I mean, it is only January and we've got a long way to go, and lots can happen and usually does in politics. But we have to recognize the fact that, he's got a good shot at becoming president again. I think that the one thing we should remember, I mean, as Canadians in particular, is that what Trump has tapped into and what some of Biden's policies are tapping into is a resurgence of isolationism and protectionism in the United States. And, this isn't new. It's been going on for a long time. The Jones Act came in 1920. We had the Smoot-Hawley tariffs. I mean, we've had, so we need to be prepared for any eventuality. We need to be on top of our game because our relationship with the United States is so important from an economic point of view, and we can't afford to have that go south. We managed under great duress to deal with Donald Trump the first go around. I'm sure we could do it again. It won't be easy, but as I say, I think some of Biden's policies are blatantly protectionist also. So it's going to be a challenging year for sure.
Laura, I wonder, I mean, last time with Trump, it was, the tearing up of NAFTA and the renegotiation of NAFTA and sort of the full court effort to preserve it. Is Canada vulnerable to a repeat of that? Or do you think if Trump should win, it's safe because that's now his trade deal and he would like to keep it in place? Or do you think he wants to tear it up and try to make it even better for America?
No, I don't think anyone is safe. First of all, if we look at Trump 2.0, I think we'll look back at Trump 1.0 with nostalgia as to what a kind and gentle presidency that was. Because this time, there's no adult supervision. Remember, we had Jim Mattis in defense, and we had Kelly as the chief of staff, and we had Sonny Perdue on agriculture. And they could tap on the president's shoulder and say, Canada, it's important for all sorts of reasons. Now that sort of adult supervision, that Republican old guard will be gone. They make no secret of the fact that they're already looking for very Trumpish candidates to go into the cabinet, as well as clearing the decks of any expertise in senior posts. So I think the first thing that we'll see, because this overlaps with our NAFTA USMCA review that's also starting within the next couple of months,
Right.
it's going to be open season on trade. And while Canada has the treaty protections of NAFTA, CUSMA, Donald Trump has often used his presidential powers to put temporary emergency tariffs on everybody and anybody. And I think that's very likely. He's already calling for a 10% universal tariff. And I think at least temporarily, until Congress can get in and straighten that out, Canada should expect either that tariff or a threat of that tariff that is significant enough to destabilize supply chains.
David, I'm not sure you'd look back at a first Trump presidency with nostalgia and fondness, considering that you were the ambassador in the middle of all of that. But look, a lot can happen, as you say, before we potentially get to that point. But I just wonder about the domestic political considerations in the United States. Because if Trump does win, he has promised to use the power of that office in a way that we have really never seen. But if he doesn't win, and if Biden wins, we saw what happened on January 6th, 3 years ago. The level of paranoia and mistrust in institutions and anger directed at the government hasn't really gotten any better, it would seem, in the years since. Do you think there's a risk of political violence again, depending on how this election cycle should go?
I think that there's a real stress and strain on democracy right now, and it's not just in the United States, but we kind of always assume that the U.S. is going to be stable from the democracy. It's been the democratic leader of the world since the Second World War, and the stresses and strains are unmistakable. I was shocked at the events of January the 6th. It was just stunning to me to see what happened, and not just the violence, but the clear mistrust of the establishment and everything else. And that's not got better; it's got worse. And so, yeah, I think it's a real risk. And I hope to Laura's point that Americans come out, vote in heavy numbers, and vote, and then are satisfied. I hope, regardless of what the election result is, that it's clear, and that people are satisfied that it was a fair election. Because otherwise, it could be very dangerous. Could be very dangerous.
Laura, the bigger picture, the geopolitical implications for the world, for Europe in particular, and Ukraine specifically. The U.S. is already struggling to get financial aid through Congress to help with the war effort there. Trump is no fan of NATO, as we've seen. I mean, if Biden can't get the aid through in the current political context, what do you think would happen to the whole military alliance with most of Europe should Trump win?
I think any military alliance is very vulnerable. As we've heard from other commentators, this may be a domino effect in which lack of U.S. leadership really exacerbates some pretty bad conditions in the world into much worse. At the same time, there are world leaders who are preparing for the worst this time and are looking at sort of options for alliances without the United States. What can we do in the absence of U.S. leadership? And I think that's at least an important conversation to have. I'm not sure that it's going to have much of an impact, but we need to be having these conversations.
David, what's your sense on that? I was in Brussels when Donald Trump went to his first NATO summit and called them all a bunch of freeloaders, right? He's made it very clear how he feels about this particular alliance. I don't know if he'd leave it, but he'd probably stop funding it in the way, or contributing to it in the way that the U.S. has to this point.
Well, I think what we have to do is stop wringing our hands about what might or might not happen in the United States. and make sure that we have our act together. And by that, I mean, I think we've got to step up more in terms of the defense of North America, the NORAD renewal, and I think we've got to be able to show that we are not freeloaders, which many politicians in the United States have labeled us as, and we have not been playing as much of a role recently as we have, historically. And I'm not just blaming this government. This has been going on for a while. And I think we've got to, make sure that we're not just talking about what we want when we're talking to the United States, but understanding better as to how we can be real partners. And I think that was the key in terms of getting the steel and aluminum tariffs off that Trump imposed through Section 232, was the support of the defense and the security establishment in the United States for our position. The way we were able to get the NAFTA thing renewed was, I think it was an upgraded NAFTA, was actually to work with American business, to work with American lawmakers, pull together as a country and do it. I mean, we can sit and criticize and bemoan what's going on in the United States, and obviously we're interested and we're concerned, but we need to be sure that we have our act together, because otherwise, as I said, it's not just Donald Trump. Donald Trump may be, the most blatant example of the isolationism and protectionism, but it goes throughout the American politics right now, and so we've got to be ready for it, and I'm not sure we are.
Yeah, Laura, Donald Trump is saying those things because there's an audience for those things and there's support for those things. I mean, he was elected because of what he spoke to. It exists broadly in American society. So we're a couple of days away from the Iowa caucus. It starts on Monday. I mean, what are you watching for there as the Republicans get set to pick their nominee?
Well, I mean, it looks like the Iowa caucuses, definitely Donald Trump, maybe a closer race in New Hampshire, and fingers crossed that Nikki Haley can pull it out in her home state. But what are we looking for in terms of Canada? It really needs to shore up its alliances within the regions of the United States. Has very few friends in Washington, but throughout Texas and Florida and New York, et cetera. That's where Canada needs to be promoting its game once again.
David, that sounds familiar. That seems like that's the strategy you employed last time, right? Do you think that can sustain you through this latest round, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like in some respects, after we got the CUSMA, USMCA, whatever one wants to call it, done, that there was kind of a sigh of relief, and everybody, they didn't go back to sleep, but it was done deal. This is a perpetual effort that we have to make. The United States is too important to our economic prosperity to take it for granted. And the other thing too is that, when I was in Washington, I didn't have any problem phoning a premier, regardless of political stripe, or business person, regardless of their interests or labor, or everybody rallied around and did their part. And I think Laura's point is absolutely true. In Texas or in Arizona or in all sorts of places in the United States, Canada doesn't come to mind immediately, but we are important to them. We're important trading partners, investors. And I wouldn't, say we go down and lecture them about it, but going down and being seen to be, an important partner of the United States is critical to avoiding, what could be very bad for our economy. So.
All right, Laura Dawson, David McNaughton, thank you so much. We appreciate your time. We'll speak to you again in the future. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Good, Laura.